Welcome to Go Bucks. Thank you for joining us. We are all here to talk about some breaking news coming up. Before that, though, just wanted to say we are all from different backgrounds slightly. We support different teams. We've got at least a couple Buckeye fans, at least one Wolverine fan, and then one, I guess, Buckeye fan because he has to. 2 kids are going to Ohio State. But one thing we all have in common is we love this rivalry between Michigan and Ohio State. So if you love this rivalry as much as us, please subscribe to the channel. We would greatly appreciate it. I think, probably got serious about this channel about a month ago. So we are a startup. So anything you guys can do to help us out, your subscribes mean a lot. So we greatly appreciate it. In any case, though, what's up, guys? Any Buckeyes ready to slit their wrists?
Well, I tell you, Nate, it was quite the roller coaster ride when you've got Jeremiah Smith committing earlier in the week, and you're thinking, man, you got the number 1 and number 2 kids in the 24 class in the same class, and then things started to turn a little bit last night with Dylan Raiola taking all of his Ohio State stuff off his social media, and you start thinking, as soon as his dad got hired at Nebraska, I was nervous. But yeah, it's been quite the roller coaster, Nate. Not quite ready to slit my wrist. He's not a 23 kid. If we were losing the number 1 quarterback in the 23 class, I think it'd be a different story.
Well, you know what? What's the guy's name that just committed to Ohio State like a couple days ago? Lincoln, and I can't pronounce it.
Lord have mercy, I can't either. The kid from South Dakota.
But we were all thinking, okay, hey, this is pretty awesome. This kid must really have a lot of confidence in himself. He flipped it, from South Dakota. I guess, hindsight, looking at that, but we probably should have thought maybe Dylan Raiola was probably maybe thinking about leaving. I mean, because there's no reason for that kid to commit at that time, and really for Ohio State to accept his commitment. With Raiola,
we needed an extra quarterback anyway.
I don't see the two being related at all, to be honest. I mean, they needed a 23 quarterback. They lost the one kid they had committed with Matt. Did he end up at Florida State? Is that where he ended up? Because he was committed elsewhere as well. Brock, I can't remember his last name right offhand, but they had a 23 quarterback that had decommitted and is down, I believe, at Florida State. And then they went out and got the kid from South Dakota in this class. I don't think it has anything to do with whoever's coming in 24. I mean, if you come to Ohio State, you have to assume there's going to be a stud quarterback in every class. So
yeah, I was just reading on Ozone. Some of the people were saying there was a rumor that his parents were upset that they signed another quarterback, but I can't imagine. I mean, this guy wasn't rated super highly, and we already have a couple 5-stars on the roster. I would be surprised if that was the reason, but I mean, maybe he's going to be a high riser. The guy's an incredible athlete. He plays baseball, basketball, and football. So maybe, he's better than his ranking, and possibly his parents were a little upset by that. I'm not sure if that's legitimate.
It really seems like,
or just his family, his dad coaching in Nebraska.
It really seems like, I mean, this was literally just days apart. This is happening. Yeah. It really seems like there's got to be a connection. And the idea that Ohio State already has, who's the McCord kid, 5-star. They've got another kid.
Devin Brown.
To take another quarterback, that just seems like the timing right now. It doesn't seem like they would do that, because you always know someone's gonna transfer. Granted, but it's a good thing they took Lincoln, honestly.
So Jason,
no question. Yeah, no question.
Did you see the Gene Smith press conference, or not press conference, the interview he had with some Buckeye Beat reporters yesterday?
No, I did. I heard it and then heard the follow-up reaction to it on Zach Smith's podcast as well. It's softball city, man. It's crazy.
So is this an NIL issue, do you guys think, or is this a new coach at Nebraska and then his dad gets a job there issue?
I think they hired his dad. I mean, his dad's an
Raiola.
NFL offensive lineman. They're hiring him. Matt Rule is, I mean, good on. We talked about this last time that the Big Ten has really leveled up with coaching. I'm bringing Matt Rule to Nebraska, coming regardless of whatever his track record was at Carolina. He's just coming out of the NFL. He did a hell of a job at Baylor, and then you get Luke Fickell coming to Wisconsin, and then obviously you're adding USC and UCLA. So it's in the era of the transfer portal being wide open and the NIL. So it's just a different world. But I think I was much more concerned. I think it's much more likely it's linked to his dad than it is to this kid from South Dakota.
Yeah. Or
hey, go back to that comment. Go ahead, Matt. Sorry.
I was just going to say, I agree with you. I think it's most likely family. But I think the other concern would be if Ohio State had their NIL together, their NIL game together, and they were making sure that all their top prospects that they really needed to get on board had the money set up. I don't think this would be an issue, even with his dad in Nebraska, because we're going to have, elite coaching for him here. And we're going to have the money, like we should have the money set up where he doesn't need to be going to Nebraska. I mean, he's not going to be, Nebraska's going to be better, but they're not going to be winning like any of the other top schools. And if he had his NIL collective together, I think that he would still be here. I just think that they need to get the ball rolling.
But here's the thing too, Matt, is that he's a legacy at Nebraska, because his dad went to Nebraska. So it's kind of like Joe Burrow. Like Joe Burrow wanted to go, when he transferred from Ohio State, he wanted to go to Nebraska, but Scott Frost didn't want him.
Scott Frost,
and he's an idiot. And that's the whole deal. Like now, Matt Rule's taking the legacy kid. We have no idea what this kid's motivation was for doing this, but I'm still more convinced than anything that one, he grew up around that program because his dad went there and I believe he's in their kind of Hall of Fame or whatever it is, but he's obviously a famous alum from that school. His dad just got hired as an offensive line coach, and then Matt Rule's coming from the NFL, and he's going to be the man. Like he's going to be starting from day one. You're not getting that guarantee at Ohio State. You're just not. You're probably going to redshirt, at minimum. I don't care how good you are. Quinn Ewers wasn't going to start. Quinn Ewers was guaranteed nothing coming here. Nothing. So,
you're right. It is the offensive. His dad was hired as the offensive line coach. And so, he hasn't committed to Nebraska yet. Dylan hasn't, but it's coming, right?
Absolutely.
The writing's on the wall. And so it's happening. And man, it stinks because this is what I always think of, like when Terrell Pryor committed to Ohio State, or even CJ Stroud. Like Michigan was recruiting both of them really highly. Instead of having them on your team, it's bad enough that you lost them, but now you're going to have to play against them too. Mm-hmm. So Nebraska, when they get him, granted that's a couple of years from now, they're really rolling right now in Nebraska.
Why?
Somebody else want to chime in? I don't want to.
Why Nebraska?
Why Nebraska? Hey, Matt Rule, he's the coach. And, of course, Nebraska is the kid's dad's alma mater, and his dad's getting hired there. Yeah. Like Walton said, hire the family plan. Yeah,
they haven't
that
been good in 30
everywhere.
years, though. They haven't been good in 30 years. What are they doing right now?
It's all about the momentum.
Look, and Rule is a much better coach than we all thought Scott Frost would do a better job. Obviously, having played there and coming from his success at Central Florida, but he never recruited to the level he needed to. And it sounded like there was a whole bunch of rumors about crazy shit that was going on there, that he wasn't nearly as committed as he needed to be. Matt Rule's there was some definite rumors that he was not, let's just say he wasn't focused on the job. Matt Rule will be focused on the job. And I'm not saying that that's going to turn Nebraska around. Look, you're still going to be in a conference with Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, pretty soon with USC and UCLA. There's no guarantee that you're going to be winning Big Ten titles, but they're certainly trending in the right direction. The other thing is I don't think, just because Quinn Ewers was quarterback at Texas didn't guarantee that they were going to win, their conference either. It takes a while, especially at that position, to develop. But the one thing you can almost guarantee is if he goes to Nebraska, he is going to start from day one. They will live with all of his mistakes. He will grow. He will get a lot of playing time. He may be 3 years and off to the NFL. At Ohio State, you are almost guaranteed you will not be starting as a true freshman. You will have stiff competition at that school.
One correction here. Apparently, it's not his, and I think I maybe misspoke. It's not his dad that's the O-line coach. It's his uncle who's the O-line coach, Donovan Raiola. So that's
I'm sorry.
correction. So there's
that was good. That was a good correction. Now I think I may have misspoke on that. I thought it was his dad. They've gotten hired. Yeah. Either way, there's a family connection that's clear, and you have a coach coming over that had recent success at the collegiate level at Baylor, who parlayed that into an NFL job, and is just very recently coming out of a stint, running offense in the NFL. So there's some positive momentum. But again, I think one kid is not going to make or break your program. But certainly at the quarterback position, that one kid is more important than anybody else. But it's no guarantee. I mean, just look at Texas. Look at Quinn Ewers. He was good. He was decent for a freshman, but they're not contending this year.
I have a question for you guys. So, first of all, if it's just his uncle, then I don't think that that's significant enough. If I were, if my kid was deciding on, I had a 5-star quarterback who was deciding on what college to go to, I wouldn't care if my uncle was, or if the kid's uncle was going to be at one of these other schools. That wouldn't matter even a little bit. I would want him to go to where he's going to compete for national championships and have the best quarterback coach that could help him get into the NFL and do well and be a top 5 pick in the draft. And, the only real choice, in my opinion, would be whether you're going to be going to a school where, you're just concerned about starting versus going to Ohio State or USC and having a chance. If you win the quarterback spot, you're going to likely win the Heisman. I mean, play for Lincoln Riley or Ryan Day, and you're going to have a really good chance.
Well, yeah, and it's not completely said and done, right? I mean, but it's very rare that a kid decommits from a school and then goes back. It's not impossible to go back to Ohio State, but it's just does seem like it's going that way. And so what does this mean for Ohio State? I mean, that's the real question. And to be honest, Michigan guy, I am not completely, as depressed as Matt about this happening, because I was really not interested in going against Dylan for 3 years. Not that Ohio State's going to not have great offense while they're there. They will, but still, I was not interested in going against Ewers, and I was not interested against going against Raiola. So I'm interested to hear what does this mean for Ohio State generally. Jason.
Don't
you talk about that? But you're paying so much for your kids to go to school. I need to hear.
So here's what I want to know then now. If they're not having this kid go here, do I get a refund or does my tuition get lower for both these kids?
No, it's got to go to women's soccer, dude. According to Gene Smith, they recommend the booster money goes to women's soccer instead of to NIL collective. So sorry, man.
And I should have had my daughter play soccer. That was my mistake.
Yeah. Sorry, man.
Here's what it does.
And I'm not, by the way, I'm not shitting on women's soccer. I'm just repeating what Gene Smith said yesterday.
Oh yeah, no worries about that. I'm with you there. I dated a couple women's soccer players in college. So, all right, what does it mean, Nate? I think it potentially sets a trend for a lot of people who want to go to Ohio State or maybe thinking Ohio State, right? Like you lose this guy, now you got a couple other recruits or potentially not going to go there, especially if they're not paying that sweet NIL money, or maybe they see this kid drop out and it's an opportunity for somebody else. But I think it might be start of a bad trend.
But it happened last year, and the wheels didn't fall off. We're playing in the playoff. Nothing happened.
You know what? like ripples on a pond, buddy. It starts slow and then builds big to the end.
I don't think. I think if anything, you've seen a track record of every quarterback that plays under Ryan Day ends up a first round pick in the NFL draft so far. So I am not at all worried.
Ryan Day is going to be there after another season. He's got to beat Michigan next year.
That has nothing. I'm not even getting into that part of it. My whole thing on this is why, if this were a different position, like if this were the number one offensive tackle in the country, and we had somehow landed him and we couldn't hold on to him, yeah, I'd be freaking out. If this were the number one defensive end, or corner or something else, but wide receiver and and quarterback, Ohio State is going to be okay. Like the fact that that's why I was saying before the show started that I'm more concerned. Let me see how this 23 class ends up, because they've got an absolutely stacked wide receiver class coming in again with all this nonsense going on with the NIL. If they end up with Ennis, Tate, and the two Rogers kids in this class, any quarterback in the country is going to want to come play with them. And what's going to end up happening, I promise you, even if there is any kind of issue with recruiting high school kids at that position, Ohio State can jump in the portal at any time. You telling me if they wanted DJU from, that he wouldn't crawl over broken glass to come play in this offense at this point and reclaim his status where he was as a high schooler. There are going to be tons of guys that go into situations. Look across the country this past year. Some of the best quarterbacks in the country all had transferred at least once.
So Brian, are you thinking this might help them in the long run?
I don't think I reserve judgment. I'm on good, bad, and different. I'm just not saying, I am not at all panicked if a kid from next year's class is decommitting. Even if Jeremiah Smith decommitted, it's going to be a hell of a ride to keep a Florida kid who's the number one wide receiver in the country, according to everybody next year, and hold on to that kid, regardless of whether Raiola's in the class or not. It's going to be a fight the whole way through. But we're still fighting to keep these kids in this class. And it seems like they've at least, stopped the bleeding with the 23 class. And like I said, if this were a decommit, if you had held on to the number one quarterback in the country all through this entire cycle and you lose the top kid in the 23 class this late, you don't have time to fill that void. There is plenty of time for Ryan Day to find another and Corey Dennis and that whole staff, Pantoni and those guys, to find another quarterback in the 24 class. And in this era of the transfer portal, that position is going to be coveted by quarterbacks across the country, because everybody that works for Ryan Day goes to the pros. It's just happened. And CJ Stroud's going to, regardless of what we all think of him, and what happens in this next game or next two games, he is going to be a first-round draft pick. He may not be the number one pick in the draft, but he's going to be a first-round draft pick.
Hey, yeah, I want you to go back a comment, Nate. Can you go back on to Andrew's comment?
Yeah,
I want you guys to fill me in on that. Yeah. You can go back. You can do it. You can do it, Nate. There we go. What's going on with this one?
Good question. Cade and Eric all are both transferring to Iowa. So all of a sudden, Iowa, as terrible as their offense is getting a nice little boost. They're getting that. So we can talk about Michigan here pretty soon. I wanted to clear up Ohio State for now, just because one thing, speaking of their quarterback situation, now they're going to have three quarterbacks with Devin Brown, with who's the other 5-star? I always forget his name. McCord. Are one of those guys going to transfer? I mean, because
they could, and that's another reason. I mean, do you remember the first year that Justin Fields was there, and they ended up with one quarterback essentially. And that was like they had no depth at all behind him that first year, and you cannot be in that situation. You have to have at least two. This year they technically had three. I mean, I think if they absolutely had to run Devin Brown out there, they could have been okay. I mean, they're not contending for playoffs with a kid that young, but you have to have three on the roster. I think you have to. And that would lead me to think this spring is going to be another one that would be fun to watch. And I really wouldn't even be surprised if we see a transfer out and we see a transfer in at quarterback.
Very possible.
If somebody's out there. I mean,
well, supposedly Devin Brown is good enough that he's not going to want to sit on the bench and just, be a support player.
I don't blame
he's
him.
Probably going to leave, and no one would blame them.
He might even
the way it goes.
Nate, he might win the job.
He may even win the job. Very true.
We just don't know. I mean, and quite frankly, we've seen really good teams. If you have a really good roster and you're coached really well, we've seen teams have success with first-year starters. And there are going to be a bunch of really good, top-tier programs next year with new starters. I mean, Michigan's one of the exceptions to that. But that's why they're going to be very, very highly rated coming into next season. But there are going to be a bunch of teams that are going to have new starters next year.
Yeah, and
Alabama, Georgia is probably going to have a new one. Ohio State's going to have a new one. You look up and down, like the Caleb Williams and JJ McCarthy's are the exception, not the rule next year.
It is, and you know what? Speaking of Michigan, they've been playing with terrible, terrible quarterback depth all year long. JJ can't get hurt. I mean, it's devastating for any starting quarterback to get hurt, right? I mean, but you can have a decent backup. You may not win the national championship with that backup, but generally you need someone. JJ has nobody behind him right now. And we just heard Jadyn Davis was a lock, 5-star lock in the 24 class as well. Just like Dylan, he was supposed to commit to Michigan last week, and now he's just postponed that. Like awesome quarterback. We were super excited, but I think that might have something to do with NIL as well.
Wasn't that a kid that? Because I remember seeing his name initially associated with Ohio State until they had Raiola. Like they were looking at Jadyn Davis.
A lot of teams are looking at Jadyn Davis. He's looking at Georgia. He's looking at Bama. I mean, all the top. I mean, he's
all the big ones.
He's a top 25 overall player in the 24 class, and he's a quarterback. Yeah. So Michigan.
Well, and let me ask you this, Nate, from a Michigan standpoint, same deal. If you know that JJ McCarthy could have 2 more years potentially as the starter there, are you and you're a high school quarterback, are you in a hurry to go there? Because you're certainly not playing next year. You may not even play the following year.
There's
no guarantee.
Michigan's got a lot going against him right now as far as recruiting goes. Number one, like you just said, the quarterback situation. I mean, chances are any quarterback is going to stay there and redshirt for their first year. I think that's if they're getting on NIL. I think they're good if they know they're going to be the starter next year. But right now, I mean, our coach just tried to go to the NFL last year and failed or decided not to, whatever happened there. And so he's obviously wanting to go, or he showed he wanted to go. So why would you go there? It doesn't make any sense for, a kid to come there if they're hoping Harbaugh's going to stay. So, I mean, it's just there's just many things going against Michigan right now. And it's showing in their class ranking too.
I would say it's probably 50-50 that he goes pro after this year.
It really could be. I mean, he would probably have, I don't know, I'm just looking at the jobs available or the possible jobs available coming up in the NFL, and they're not great. The Colts, that's not great. I mean, that's a bad job right now.
They lit up the Vikings today.
They did. I was 36-7 at one point.
Yeah.
Hey, Nate,
crazy, man.
I got a question for you. If Harbaugh wins a national championship here, does that increase or decrease the opportunity? Decrease or increase the chance he goes to the pros?
I think it probably increases. I don't know if he's trying to get out or not. I don't know Harbaugh's thought process right now at all. I wouldn't be surprised either way, but I've thought about that too. If he wins a national championship, no one's going to blame him for leaving, right? I mean, well, we would. We wouldn't like that. Excuse me. But of course, yeah, I mean, he has an out. He can say, hey, I brought you back, won a national title. What are you going to do?
Right.
But he's also maybe jockeying. He's jockeying for one of those big shitty contracts, that other teams have gotten.
Look, he got embarrassed.
Million.
They embarrassed him nationally in public when it came to taking his money away from him. And good on him for taking that personally and coming back and it's that Jordan meme, like, and I took that personally. You just see he came back and kicked ass. I mean, and he did it with guys that, I mean, granted, he raided his brother's staff, but hey, that's what if you've got a brother who's been a, decades long success story in the NFL and has those guys, he's gone with younger guys, a lot like, to be honest, a lot like Saban. Saban realized his shortcomings, and Michigan was an awful offensive team for years, and through the Urban Meyer era, they never had an offense nearly as good as the offense has been the last 2 years for Michigan. Yeah, and this one with McCarthy, even though they're not, there's some consistency, I think, issues with their throw game. They're dynamic, and they can beat you. They showed at Ohio State they can beat you with dynamic runs and dynamic passing.
And we didn't know that. We didn't know that before the Ohio State game. I think everyone was surprised. Michigan fan, Ohio State fan, and Jim Knowles was probably surprised at that.
Shocked. Yep.
Yeah.
Shocked.
Can we address Antoine's question?
Yes, I would like to. That is an interesting question. Antoine asks, I have a serious question for you guys. Did Jim break OSU? Not even trolling, but maybe totally break them, but take them down a step between the players and the fan base. They seem to be mentally broke. I don't think that they did. I think that here's my thought. I think that Stroud is an awesome quarterback. He's an awesome quarterback. He really is. But I don't think I trust him to win a big game. I think it's probably Stroud. And I don't know how you guys feel about that, but I just feel like Stroud is not the type of quarterback to win the big game. And I thought, I didn't really think that until they lost to Michigan this last time.
The defense has got to step up too, though, because they've got pummeled the last 2 years.
Yeah. The roster is great. Matt, what do you think?
I want to hear Matt's. Yeah, I want to hear Matt's.
How many yards did they throw on them last year? I think 450 or so. And we had issues in the red zone. In addition to just the defense being a complete shit show last year, but then this year, the defense couldn't hang. And it's not about being broke, but I do think that it might be until CJ shows differently. I think that the teams in general rally around their quarterback, in a positive or negative way. And if their quarterback is not willing to run or showing toughness, it sort of can ripple down. Like, you've seen lots of players. TCU, I was surprised that TCU lost in the Big 12 title game because their quarterback was going crazy. I mean, I haven't seen a performance like that, from a guy who's not, Diego seems to think he was a Heisman candidate, but, that guy obviously didn't have as much talent as a lot of the other top quarterbacks, but he had more grit, and you could tell his guys were trying really hard because they're following his lead, and it's unfortunate they lost that game, but it wasn't because of him.
They lost because they quit going to him at the goal line. They didn't 4 times.
Yeah,
they didn't run the ball with them. That's not his problem.
Well, he also doesn't play. He doesn't play linebacker either. They couldn't stop the run,
right?
And that's something that hurt him all year. But let me just jump in on that question about the. I don't think that Ohio State is broken, but I definitely think they are 100% inside Ohio State's head. Sure. And I think that the whole program, they spent an entire year, Mickey Marotti and that entire program took that Michigan was more physical and beat the piss out of them in Ann Arbor, took that to heart, and they spent the entire year trying to prove that they were not going to be out physical by Michigan and they weren't going to get run on the way that they did in Ann Arbor. And they didn't. They committed every single resource they possibly could to stopping the run. And the problem was that it exploited the weakness that all of us saw in Ohio State all year long, and that was one-on-one coverage. And they did an amazing job of they beat them in every possible way in the throw game early in that game. And it put them in conflict in the second half. And they were, Michigan only had 2 big runs. They both went for touchdowns. They had 4 big passes, 3 of them went for touchdowns. They had a huge PI call. I mean, everything that could go wrong went wrong or went in Michigan's favor. And I do not think that the two losses, the scoreboard was very, very similar in the two games, but they were two very, very different games. Two very, very different games. And
Brian,
there's no question.
I was going to say, do you think that this last year reminds you of 1996? This year's game reminds you of the 1996 game against Michigan, where we had all those field goals in the first half, and like our offense was humming, but we were, not able to punch it in the red zone.
Sean Springs falls down.
Look, I think I don't know that it reminds me of that, because I haven't seen that game in so long. I don't remember it. What it reminds me of, though, is there's a pattern to Ryan Day's losses. There's a pattern. Look at the Clemson loss. In particular, the Justin Fields first year as a starter. They outplayed Clemson. They were the better team that day, and they lost. They lost because when they had opportunities to score in the red zone, they didn't get them. They made the mistakes. They got the penalties. They made the special teams mistakes. There were a couple busts on big plays, and they gave up. The bulk of the defensive snaps, they were winning, but they gave up big plays, and you've seen it. I think that then last year it was the same kind of deal. It was like when you could pretty much say the one key stat I think in every loss last year was red zone efficiency. If the other team scores touchdowns, they're going to win. If Ohio State doesn't score touchdowns, they're not going to win. And that was kind of the deal. I mean, they moved the ball pretty much at will against Michigan's defense. They just didn't punch it in. They were very, very, very close. I mean, I think if you can be objective, you can step back and say, man, it was a much tighter game than that score indicated. I think anybody that was watching that, you get a couple things to break one way or the other. It's a different game. And I'm not trying to be a revisionist historian here at all. I'm just saying, but they got to get out of their own head. What I don't understand is like how you get in these big games and you're the team that's consistently making the stupid mistakes. And that shit has happened all season long. Penalties, they're the ones going, whether it's Marvin Harrison when he's one-on-one. Not just throwing it up. You know what I mean? Like, but you get you're in third and 2 inside the 20, you get a penalty. The G. Scott penalty. Just on and on and on and on. Like, you've got to be more disciplined than that, and that's what gets extremely frustrating when damn well. You just look at the recruiting. Ohio State has out-recruited Michigan. There's more talent on the Ohio State roster than Michigan has. So they're getting out-coached and outplayed. Like, there's no other way to say it.
You said it kind of like between the 20s, Michigan pretty much let Ohio State move the ball. I mean, they had almost 500 yards of offense. But
yeah, they ran with their fifth-string running back, 6 yards a clip. Yeah,
they're luring them into the red zone where they know they can just kind of take them. I mean, they did that last year.
I don't know that that's part of maybe that bend but don't break kind of strategy. I don't know if it's all strategic or if it's just like, hey, dude, we can't stop them in the middle of the field.
Very true.
But it's harder to score when you're in the red zone, and we're going to pull out our bag of tricks in the red zone. And they did, and their guys made the plays. Like, there's no other way to say it. But I mean, the fact that is Ohio State broken? No, they're still going to have a top 5 recruiting class. They're still going to they're going to get this NIL thing. It will be improved by next year. They're still in the hunt. They just got the number 2, the top receiver in the country, who's like, if they can hold him, is the next coming of Randy Moss this coming year. Yeah, okay.
Receiver ever.
I mean, yeah, okay, I get it. I get the best 7-on-7 team in history. That's what Ohio State is. That's what they're seen as right now. I get it. But they are way more physical than they were last year. Their defense is way better under Jim Knowles and that staff than it was under Kerry Combs and that shit show and Matt Barnes and that shit show for 2 years. Like, they are – I don't know that they're good enough right now to legitimately win this thing. I really think – between the two programs, Michigan has a better shot to win this thing, not only just because of the matchups, but it doesn't mean that Ohio State's not falling off a cliff because of the last two losses. Yeah, shit is going to, like, if they get to play Michigan again this year and lose 3 times in a row, Columbus is going to go, I mean, the state of Ohio will go berserk. But I don't know, like if you actually look at the state of the program, I'm not in panic mode yet. I'm just not. I think that they've made the changes that they had to make based off the loss. The loss last year was much more concerning than the one this year.
Yeah, it was. And listen, so I've been thinking about this game between Ohio State and Georgia. And what I know, Ohio State has the roster to compete and to beat Georgia. The only thing is, in the back of my mind, what I keep asking is, I don't think CJ Stroud can beat Georgia. Do you know what I mean? I think
biggest question.
Really the issue is with him. He's great. His stats are great. I just don't, and I don't know if it's his running ability. I just don't know if that's it. There's a lot of quarterbacks that don't run, right? But I don't know if he has the moxie to beat Georgia. He's got to actually do it.
Has he won a big game?
You have hit that 100% on the head. Like, if that's what every Ohio State fan in their heart of hearts is asking the same question. I think we'd all have a lot more confidence if we had Justin Fields in this game, but we don't. And this is the thing about it is, like, CJ still has an opportunity here. He's got an opportunity. I mean, he fell from, what was he? Was he second in the Heisman last year? But he fell to third because he played like he didn't do anything the last couple weeks of the year.
Yeah,
and
you can't lose to your rival the last game and win the Heisman
and play like that. Well, and play like that, right? Like if he throws a couple more touchdowns at the end and it's a close game and he leads a couple drives and it's just too little, too late. But he threw 2 interceptions on the last 2 drives.
Yeah,
like he didn't seal the deal. Like he's got an opportunity here to cement his legacy. And he's getting, whether they deserve it or not, they're getting that opportunity. But no, I think you're 100% right, Nate. I mean, I think that's how we all feel.
Yeah. And hey, I don't know if this is, like, I'm seeing in some of the comments, and I have not heard this, but Nathan is saying that he's heard a rumor about Marvin Harrison Jr. to USC. I haven't looked that up or seen it. If that might be out there, I wouldn't doubt it's out there. But I'm afraid to talk about it until that's something real. But I'm seeing it in a couple spots here, and I don't know why that would happen, though.
Well, I do. I mean, think about it. Like we don't you remember that we all talked about how it was a surprise that Chris Olave came back and played with CJ Stroud.
Yeah.
So if they're the only people that know, like the people inside the building at the Woody knew CJ Stroud was legit. I don't know, but none of us knew that. And maybe the thought is, even though Kyle McCord's his boy from high school, maybe he's not all that. And if he thinks if Marvin Harrison, or I'm not saying that he is, but I'm saying what would, if you're going into your last year in college and you have an opportunity to play with a legitimate star, who the starter is going to be, an absolute superstar out there in Caleb Williams, in an offense that's going to throw the ball around. I mean, I can understand why, if there are questions about who's going to be the starter at Ohio State next year. And on top of that, you throw NIL in there, like that kid's going to get paid regardless. Yeah. I guarantee he's going to get endorsements regardless.
Right.
So, I'm not saying that he is or isn't, but I mean, we've kind of seen some smoke. We saw Joel Klatt was talking about some big name kid going and this and that. But I mean, it's the same deal. I love Marvin Harrison Jr. and I want to see him play his last year at Ohio State. I certainly don't want him to go, but they're still recruiting at a high level at that position they still have Brian Hartline, they still have Ryan Day. And quite frankly, they need to get back to moving people on the offensive line, or it isn't going to matter. Like, they need to get a dude back there, going back to the Ezekiel Elliott, J.K. Dobbins days. Like, I think that they need to get back to, especially in the red zone. And I wouldn't mind if they had a quarterback who's at least a running threat in the red zone. I think that's missing from the offense right now.
And I don't think McCord is, though, right? I mean, I haven't seen him play enough, I guess, but I don't know. Is McCord going to be maybe an elite passer? He's a 5-star dude, but an elite passer, but he wants to sit back there and just like take the sack.
I don't know.
We
haven't seen enough.
All they need to do is have somebody, if the space is open in front of them, take it. Like Joe Burrow does that great, but he's not a running quarterback. But he's going to
No,
run where the right.
He ran a
when
little.
you have to. Yeah, but he's one of those guys. Like if you watched him, especially at LSU, his ability to create time in the pocket and make guys miss and then make plays was unbelievable. And CJ has some of that. I mean, he can get he gets out of trouble in the pocket quite a bit. But it's those times when you're like, dude, we just need 6 yards right now.
Right.
We don't need you to hang around and try to throw 30 yards downfield.
12 yards in front of him, and he doesn't run.
Yeah, just take it. So, especially in the red zone, you got to equate the numbers somehow, and that's where I think it's just so difficult to not have a guy. If you remember, I mean, Dwayne Haskins broke the conference record for touchdown passes. They were awful in the red zone that year because he didn't run.
Yeah, and you know what? I've got to
awful.
point this out though. It looks like we lost Matt, and I know he was already, like on window watch because of.
Hey,
because
somebody
of.
take his shoelaces.
May have been this Marvin Harrison rumor
no.
that someone needs to go check on Matt.
I mean, I sincerely hope that's not true, but it's just one of those things right now. I don't know with this craziness and this NIL thing. I just hope that they get this shit straightened out, because if the university administration does not support the NIL, it is going to be a problem.
Yeah,
it is going to be a problem, and it's not trending. And it's not trending in the right direction.
No.
Yeah, both Ohio State and Michigan need to get their shit.
Hey, Brian, maybe there's a couple good recruits off that soccer team.
I love it, man.
Off that soccer team, yeah, your tuition's going up, Jason, for your kids at Ohio State.
That's right.
They need the NIL
you
money.
get a discount with multiple kids in this school. It's ridiculous.
Well, you know what they're worried about, and you can kind of see where they're coming from. Is Ohio State's had a lot of athletic boosters for a long, long time. And I mean, they're a $1 billion business, that athletic department. And now if you've got boosters who are choosing between giving money to the athletic department and giving it to the NIL, well, of course, Gene Smith is going to come out and say, well, call us first. Call us first. We should talk this through. You may want to keep that money coming to the athletic department.
Nobody cares outside of football, though. That's how it's going to always be.
Well, and it's got to be a blend, right? I don't think you can wholly giving, especially giving high. I understand, and I actually agree with the bigger programs. It seems anyway that programs like Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, they want to give that money to the kids that are on their roster more than high school seniors to come to the program as the incentive to come. And I agree with that. And I think that what's happening now with these deals with kids, recruits getting 6-figure plus deals, I don't see how that's sustainable, because there's such a high burn rate through those guys don't pan out. Not all those guys pan out. That's not a good investment. But somehow there has to be more support for the kids that are on the roster besides the superstars. And because, guys come, a 5-star recruit could be Cam Babb and have 4 ACLs, 2 ACLs, be done, And so whatever money you got is what you got. And so, I don't know. It's just so hard, man. I don't know what the answer is, but I think as long as you have sustained success on the field and you're putting kids in the NFL and you have that track record, you're going to have a leg up. You're not going to have to outright buy kids at the highest rate.
Well, the NCAA is going to have
you're going to have to do something.
But they're not going
to.
They're not going to. But that's what should happen, though. That's what should happen. One thing, I just saw something come in, and we have a comment. Michigan apparently just won the Joe Moore Award again.
Is that breaking news?
Yeah, and I guess they're the first team to do it back-to-back. Wow. So, man.
Good job, Nate.
Woo. Yeah, well, I didn't do much. All I did was watch them. Thanks for telling me the good job. But Michigan's got one more. They just got a transfer from another kid.
Yeah.
From where was it? I think Arizona State. So
wasn't he the number one kid in the portal?
I don't know if he was number one, but he was up there. because obviously offensive line. But they're using that as that's the formula for how they've been winning. Is the line.
Listen, if you go back, I think one of the better, maybe the best offensive line that Ohio State had in recent memory, when they went out to Rutgers and got Jonah Jackson and added him to Wyatt Davis and Josh Myers and that group.
Yeah.
One guy can make a huge difference. And I think Ohio State's going to have to get in the portal and get a tackle. That's the one thing looking at next year I'm legitimately a little bit concerned about. Not a little bit, I'm a lot bit concerned about. If they want to compete, and I think they can. I think they'll have a good enough – their defense is going to be legit next year. They'll be fine offensively. I'm not worried about that. We've seen it time in and, year in and year out. But they will not be if that offensive line is a weakness, and you're losing both tackles. You're losing probably your right guard. I hope that Whippler comes back at center. If they can keep Donovan Jackson and keep Whippler, they're going to have, at minimum, they're going to have to replace 3 guys, I think, on the offensive line as starters. And they've only got maybe 2 to 3 guys that are potentially ready to go on the 2 deep. So it's a concern. I think they're going to have to add somebody.
Well, and you know what? I think, are those guys NFL guys you mentioned? Like, are they going to go to the NFL in the draft? Or?
Paris Johnson Jr., he could be a top 10 pick.
No,
if he has
Paris Johnson's gone.
Yeah, he's gone.
Jones is gone.
Are you talking about the guys that are coming in?
The other guys, because I'm thinking.
Hard to say, man. They're all the things that you're hearing are encouraging, but of course you're going to get encouraging news about younger kids, right? So it's like the Hinsman kid that they got last year. I believe he was from Wisconsin. He's already got his black stripe removed. So they were really high on him coming out of high school. I think he's got a shot to potentially, get in the mix as a potential starter at guard. The Zen Malkowski kid, Josh, is a big kid. We haven't really seen him much on the field. Josh Fryer's played a lot this year, but I tend to think he's a guard. He was the one that came into the Michigan game because Matt Jones didn't play, and so Vamahi started and was terrible, and then Fryer came in and actually played really well in that game, I thought. So he'll definitely be in the mix for one of the spots, but you're replacing at least one legitimate first-round tackle and a guy who will probably go in the top 4 rounds at the other tackle that played a hell of a lot of games in DeJuan Jones. So you're losing a lot of experience and depth, and I almost feel like they have to go out. And it's crazy because if you hear the story of the kid from Alabama who was a starting guard who was leaving because his backup was making more in NIL than he was.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy, man.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right, well, we're wrapping this up. Every time we do this, like at this wrap up, it's almost with this NIL stuff. I want to say, what do you think's going to happen? But is Michigan and Ohio State going to get their shit together? Are they? What do we think? Is this how is this going to affect everything?
JJ, you can go ahead, man. I always feel like I take up everybody's time.
Actually, you know what? I don't have an answer to that. I'd like to hear what you guys think, to be honest with you.
Well, I'll tell you one thing that I'm really, really happy about is I'm very, very glad that Zach Smith and his podcast are leading the charge here to shine a light on the relationship between the universities, Ohio State University's administration, and the collectives, plural, and that it is all the dirty laundry is getting aired right now. And that it is not painting the administration in a favorable light, and that is great because the worst thing that could happen is there's no transparency, and the administration is not called out for what they're doing. We've already seen improvements where now that there's a code, up in the Schottenstein Center for basketball games that you can scan and donate. They're starting to get that happening more and more where it's not necessarily supported, but at least they're not working against it. the story of Gene Smith pushing people to his financial advisors collective instead of Schottenstein's, or getting on that podcast on Friday and telling people to call them first, because they're of course going to encourage the boosters to keep their money in the athletic department. That's not helping the football program at all. And like I said, I do see where I know why he's doing what he's doing, but at least it's out there where everybody can hear it and call him out on his bullshit. So, if we want to compete for national titles against the SEC teams and teams out west, that's what it's going to take. So at least we've seen some encouraging signs. And like I said, I'm not worried. I'm not going to worry about 24 right now. I just want to get through 23 and get through signing day for the 23 class. Hopefully they keep this class intact. If they could somehow get, one of these defensive ends to come, I'll be overjoyed. It seems like they're going to at least get the Mickens kid out of Indiana, but if they could get Damon Wilson or Mateo Yu, I haven't given up on that yet. I'm hopeful, but it's hope at this point. But at least let's see what happens. The fact that they didn't lose a couple of these kids that were potentially trending to other schools is encouraging news. And the fact that we're talking about this, there's more information out there that I know the university's not happy about, is I think a good thing for Ohio State's NIL. And I think really for the other schools should be doing this, the fan bases and the media coverage and all that should be doing the same thing with their schools, to make sure that they're at least doing everything they can to keep up. So there's still time. I think everybody's figuring this stuff out, because I don't think anybody really knows exactly what's going to happen, but it's pretty clear that things can't keep going the way they're going, and have these Midwest teams continue to compete if they don't get their shit together.
Yeah, Brian, I think you're a lot more optimistic than I am, because I don't see, and maybe Ohio State more so, but I don't see Michigan going the route of the Texas A&M and going out and just paying all these recruits. I don't think they're going to.
That's not what I meant. That's
no.
not what I meant.
I know that that's not what you meant about Texas A&M, but I don't see that this happening at all for Michigan. At least Michigan. Maybe Ohio State will get their shit together a little bit better. I don't see Michigan.
I want kids on the roster.
They're going to go back to the Ivy League, start playing Cornell again, I think, before they start paying these players. They are just so stubborn. And I know Ohio State's stubborn too, but Michigan so much more so. I think they're going to be in trouble. I mean, I think that Michigan's class right now, you're looking at probably what we're going to get, and we're going to be looking more at developing players rather than trying to get the top guys.
Well, I want to see guys that are on the roster that deserve, that are there and are clearly committed to everything it takes to be a player that is looking to get to the end, develop to the NFL, the amount of time it takes to do that, and also working on academics for whatever, they still have to stay eligible, and looking at their futures. A lot of these kids, and I do credit guys like Urban Meyer, and I know a lot of the other universities are doing this now too, but I do credit Urban Meyer for like the Real Life Wednesdays program and trying to get internships for their kids and making it clear to these guys that even if you do make the NFL, your football future is going to be short. You will have a life beyond football. You better be prepared for it. Those kids have a lot riding on that. A lot of those kids, that's their families. That's generational money for them. And it's a physical sport. Guys get hurt all the time. And that can change your earning trajectory tremendously. Mm-hmm. So I am not for high school kids. I am not for an 18-year-old with potential getting paid. I am for kids that are doing the work, that are core parts of big time programs, especially when you are playing a sport in an athletic department that's worth $1 billion. Yes, those kids deserve a piece of that. What I don't like is the fact that right now it's the same thing. It's really the stuff that we were afraid of when we first started talking about these things, where the superstars are making they have multi-million-dollar endorsement deals, and the kid that's the freshman who's in the two deep and isn't really playing on the offensive line isn't making anything at all. Nothing.
Yeah.
There is no base salary. That was a complete farce. There is no base salary for any player. Doesn't matter if it's Ohio State or Alabama, right? And there is extreme inequity in that, and there's no transparency in what those guys are getting. So it's a bad situation all the way around. And I agree with you. Something needs to get done, whether that's legislatively, whether that's the NCAA. But I'm not at all optimistic that that's going to happen in the next couple of years. But if anything, I hope the Texas A&M situation is a very, very cautionary tale. That if you go out there and you could be a Texas A&M, you can be an Ole Miss, you can jump up and pay an absurd amount of money for a recruiting class. If you don't have results, those kids are going to be gone because there's nothing stopping them from doing that.
Well, we haven't seen all those
sustained
kids play
success
yet, though, either. They are all freshmen this year. So
yeah,
what I'm really
afraid
of
those
is
kids
that
are transferring.
they're going to do good. I'm afraid they're going to do good next year. Well, I don't think they will, but I could see that just kind of taking us into a tailspin. But you said something interesting about legislation. I don't know if you saw that headline about California, and it's some sort of a lawsuit, or and I'm going to misspeak about it, but essentially it's going to allow college football players, they are adults, to be considered employees, which would make it possible for them to unionize. And granted, that's just one state, and I'm not against that by any means. I mean, the players a players union in the NFL, right?
Right.
We're still talking about adults. I'm sure there's a lot of legalese that goes along with that, but it would almost seems like if we could somehow get to a place where there is a like salary cap, the same way they have in the NFL. And see, that doesn't work for every school because they're not all equal. They don't all have the same money.
Mm-hmm.
But
and there
if we
should be
could get some way
repercussions
to do
too.
that.
If you take money and then you leave after a year, you should have to forfeit some of that back or something just to keep kids honest.
There has to be some of that going on now, even, right? I mean, they're not going to give it
think
all. I'm
there's
sure
no
there's going to be a
rule.
signing
Yeah.
bonus of some sort. But you're right. You're right. There's got to be some
no one
protections
knows.
for the
no one knows.
employer, for lack of a greater word.
Yeah, no one knows. The thing that worried me was, it was one thing. The one thing that I was completely floored by, and I guess disappointed in, was when I found out this week that there is no base salary, because we were hearing that there was like 20,000, 40,000, 60,000, something, 100,000. Every player on Ohio State's team's getting $100,000, whatever it is. That seemed a lot more equitable to me than, the superstars getting express, Jackson Smith and Jigba and CJ Stroud on billboards in New York City, coast to coast, and getting millions of dollars. And I'm not talking about car leases. I'm talking about actual endorsement deals, and these other kids, not getting anything at all, because it's a team sport. You need 85 guys. You need 100 guys, to have a program. And that's really unfortunate, because those kids, I feel more for those kids, the kids that are down the depth chart, that are, potentially risking their health and longevity as well, whether that's playing scout team, whether that's playing, you may not be a kid that ever makes the NFL, but you're still in Ohio State or Michigan or any of these big programs. You're part of the success of that program too. And we see, I'm not saying that everybody should make the same amount. I'm not saying that at all, but I do think, I would hope that if they do unionize, and that's the true future, that at least there's more equity with everyone that's playing, getting something for the risks that they take to play that sport at that level.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, especially, because of those risks. But you're right. There's got to be some sort of way to have this be equitable. Like you can't just pay a bunch of kids. Can you imagine? I mean, in the NFL, you get drafted, which is obviously not going to happen in college because that's just the way it's set up. But at least there is some way to make it equitable. And I don't have any answer.
I think the draft in these professional sports is one of the most un-American things. We don't have that in any other industry. Can you imagine that some company drafted you out of college and you can only sign with them and you can't leave if it's a shitty work situation? Are you serious?
Everyone would be a Dallas Cowboy though.
I'm just saying, like I'm all for free agency. I think the portal's great. Yeah. You know what? But at the same time, you're also dealing with kids, and sometimes adversity is the best possible thing that can happen to you. But what I feel is really, really tough, especially in that sport in particular, is you can have a catastrophic injury and you could be a kid who is looking at being able to provide generational wealth for your family and you have nothing because you blew your knee out or you did, something happened to you through no fault of your own. And that's where, if college is the minor leagues for the NFL, which we all know it is, then as bad as the minor leagues are for baseball or, pick your sport, at least there's some base level of protection for anyone who's participating in that sport. Yeah. And so and hopefully there would be some, common boilerplate language to contracts that there starts to be at least some predictability to it. I mean, I'm all for it. The superstars should be able to get whatever they can get. But I would hope that there was just, more like we've talked about. I think more equity across the board, hopefully between programs and between kids on rosters. But I don't know. Maybe that's just a pipe dream.
Maybe it is. But in any case, we're going to wrap this up. Thank you both for joining. Greatly appreciated. Thanks for everyone for watching and commenting. It's a great show. It's crazy because a lot of
Brian's
times
on it, Nate.
Yeah,
Brian's so educational. I just sit here and I'm learning stuff.
Yeah, but you look pretty though. You look pretty.
I'm not putting my ugly mug on.
Matt's wife must have made him get off. It is. He must have met his.
He's painting.
He's going back to work. Essentially, his wife is going back to work.
He needs some of that sweet NIL money for home improvement.
That's right.
Or he needed some happy juice after all of this terrible news for Ohio State. So,
the sky is falling, Nate. The sky is falling.
It is falling. Just cut my tuition, my kid's tuition. Cut it.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.